Okay, I'm back here getting ready to film the next part two of this. And I'm going to narrate a bit of my thinking and process here because, quite honestly, I'm not really pleased with how this turned out. I've been wanting to experiment lately with putting salt into watercolor, and a lot of it depends on how wet it is, what type of salt is used. I've read previously that kosher salt is recommended, but then I was watching an instructional video that was just using regular salt, Himalayan salt, and one can get different effects depending on how much salt, at what point it's put in, how wet it is, a lot of variables. Ideally, you want it to crystallize and give a little texture. On this sidewalk, I had attempted to create some texture that way, but it just was not crystallizing as I would expect, and I think I know why, and I'm going to mention that in a minute. But what I ended up doing was to use white gouache. And I'm going to talk about white gouache in a minute. This is made by Winsor & Newton. Years ago, when I first started doing watercolor, the purest watercolor technique would tell you never use white watercolor. They make a watercolor called Chinese white that's typically to use here and there to fix little mistakes. But basically, in the ideal sense, one should work with the white of the paper. That it does take more time, and one can't always achieve the dramatic effects that I've learned to achieve in more recent years by using not only initially I started to use Chinese white watercolor, especially, I remember the first time I did it, I was painting a bride with a veil, and I found that glazing with white watercolor produced a tremendous effect that I don't know that I could have. I was also working with the white of the paper, but that alone, I needed to bring back some really dark whites. But then I soon learned that escalating a little bit more to gouache is an opaque watercolor. Gouache is a medium in itself. It's technically a water paint. But when we think of watercolor, we don't typically immediately include gouache. But I've been exploring gouache a little bit more in, I guess it's more of a mixed media, and I found that Winsor & Newton Designer's white gouache is even more opaque than the traditional little tube of Chinese white that people can get in sets. Who knows why they call it Chinese white? I just, I'm not sure about that, but I like Winsor & Newton paints. The professional quality is the premium pigment. And as you see, they can, tubes of these small tubes go pretty far, but, to get a good watercolor, you need a pigment that's pure. Cheaper grade student sets, or especially the kind of watercolors one might buy for children that's very cheap, you just won't get the same effects. They're full of fillers rather than pure pigment, and they're cheap, but they don't give the transparency that you really need with a good premium watercolor. Plus, they aren't as fade resistant. So over the years, I like to put dabs of tube watercolor paint on plates. And initially I had, years ago, in a paint marker. I tried to label my plates when I first bought a bunch of plates at the dollar store. And eventually I just abandoned trying to make sense of anything. I kind of mix and match. And, you know, when watercolor dries, you can re-wet it, especially for things that are more like little spot illustrations like this. I can make paint go a long way by re-wetting. But often if you're going to do like grass, sky, or something that needs fresh pigment and soft, like you're not just wetting and re-wetting, trying to, you know, stir up the, you know, the watercolor on here. I mean, something like that, it's getting a little muddy, you know, to really do a nice transparent glaze. So what I tend to do is, and I've gotten very impure in my mixing because I have been cheating with big tubes of gouache and colors. I find that you know, you can fix mistakes, or you can, I don't know, you can just get different effects. But I don't know if I've been influenced in more recent years since I've started working with acrylic on canvas. I never used to like what I would call thick paint. I always preferred transparent watercolor. I don't know if it's my patience as I get older that I want to, I don't know, to be a watercolor purist, which when I first started, I would say I was much more a purist. It does take a little bit more time. I wonder if it's my eyesight. I find that as I get older, I tend to work darker with color. And sometimes that really bothers me because I feel like if it had been even 10 years ago, 15, 20, I might have approached this a little bit differently. Who knows? But yeah, my plates are getting kind of messy. And sometimes when I'm in a hurry, I've put gouache on the same plate as Winsor & Newton watercolor, which I can kind of tell by my own eye, like the opacity and what pigment it is. And I was doing some other illustration that gouache was really helpful. But, you know, eventually I do take these under the sink and run water and take a brush and kind of get some of the muddiness off. Sometimes I clean the whole plate depending on what remains. But, you know, say I have a big blob of pigment that really could go pretty far. You know, I'll carefully kind of rinse any impure color off with the brush lightly, but I'll leave this and let it dry and then, you know, keep working from it. I actually think one of the things that's frustrating me a bit is my sky blue. I've always liked phthalo blue for sky rather than cobalt. Well, not cobalt blue. People don't really use on sky. Cerulean is, as you see, cerulean is often, I just knocked something over. Cerulean is often used for sky work, but I've loved the intensity of a phthalo blue. Now, Winsor & Newton makes, they call it, what do they call it? Winsor, no, I think they do call it phthalo blue, but it comes in green shade or red shade. And for some reason, it's the blue, the Winsor & Newton phthalo blue green shade is what works for a sky. I do have phthalo blue Winsor & Newton in red shade that somewhere I picked it up along the way. I don't know. It's got just a little bit of a tinge of color that does not work for a sky. So I don't know why Hobby Lobby does not carry Winsor & Newton phthalo blue in green shade. They only carry the red shade. That's probably how I acquired it at one point. So I ordered, where is it? Well, no, I didn't. I'm trying to remember here. Okay, so Hobby Lobby has Master's Touch Intense Blue, which you can see $6.99 for a huge tube. And I tried it. And I think I really need to find online and order the pure Winsor & Newton Phthalo Blue again, because I feel like this substitute pigment, it's just something about it. Oh, my hand is stiff from holding the camera. Okay. Yeah, as you age, arthritis can affect things too. So if I stir this up, you know, you can get a sense of it. It is a very bright color, but I look at other paintings I've done before. I don't know. So my point is, I have been using the white gouache quite a bit, and I don't know why, but sometimes, again, it may be something with the pigment I'm using. Sometimes I can really bring out clouds with white gouache, and other times, as it looks so good when it's wet, but as it dries, I don't see the difference that I want to see. And that I find frustrating. But okay, so here we have, here's the house that I'm doing. And then here's a separate photo of rhododendrons when they were in bloom. So there's a pigment called, I love this name, it's called Opera. It's a hot pink watercolor. I don't know where my tube of it is. Ah, here it is. I do need to get some more. It is, I don't think it's a Winsor & Newton paint. I think it's by Holbein. Yes, it's a Holbein. So it is the brightest magenta watercolor I've ever seen available. And I kind of love it. But, you know, this, I mean, as you can see, the dogwood is definitely a paler pink. So I kind of started a little bit gentler, more lower key with the pink. For the azaleas, I guess typically with watercolor, you want to work from light to dark, whereas with acrylic paint, you work from dark to light, and oils, dark from light. That's where I think I've been either influenced for the good or corrupted slightly by using acrylic paint, because I tend to, sometimes with watercolor now, not be afraid to start out with some darker tones here and there, or moderately dark tones. And I think that's what I did with this for some reason. Because in my mind I think, well, I can go back with the white gouache and I can let things lay on top of it. And sometimes the white over top of a dark watercolor makes some very nice effects when it dries. But here, what I think I'm discovering is that salt will not crystallize properly when white gouache is used. It just won't. And so I've kind of, you know, didn't get much of anything from that last thing that I did. So what am I going to do? I have put some cadmium yellow out. Where's my tube here? It's here somewhere. Maybe that's it. Cadmium is much more of an opaque watercolor than, say, Winsor yellow. I use a lot of Winsor yellow when I want it to be very transparent. I printed this from a color theory book that I had years ago, and did some of the little test things just to remind myself. I don't always refer to it, but there are groups of high intensity opaques, low intensity opaque watercolors, low intensity transparent. Basically, high intensity opaques, cadmium yellow is there. So it's a very bright yellow, but it's like, it's opaque. New Gamboge. I used to use a lot of that. It's got a little bit of an orangey yellow. Windsor yellow, I think took over from my preference years ago to New Gamboge. Windsor yellow is very transparent. And anyway, some of these colors, there's also the staining factor, like right up there is indigo. Indigo is a very deep blue, but it will stain the paper. You can't lift it well. You can't really, once you use indigo, it's hard to put anything else over it in terms of like a color glaze, because of some of its properties. That's what I remember a lot about that. I do use indigo sometimes. Payne's gray is a more transparent, bluish. You know, I use that a lot instead of black. I try to avoid black whenever possible, except for things that are truly black, like wrought iron railings or something like that. Okay, so back to this. What am I going to do here? I've got some cadmium yellow. I've still got the white gouache. I put a little sap green, and I have some more fresh violet. Violet can really be used to get some darks. So what I feel I need to do, and I'm just going to start a little bit of this. Let me think here. What kind of brush do I want to take? I'd say something about like this. It's a number 2 round. I want to start getting the leaves into that. That might make a difference here in what's going on, because of the darkness of the bright pink, hot pink, the pink called opera. I think so. If I wet up this sap green, it's really not gonna give much coverage. I feel like if I put just a little white gouache in with it, it's gonna give it kind of a more opacity, to maybe start covering some areas, but I don't want it really to be that color. A lot of times it's the timing of things. See, you can see some of the sap green in there. I think what I'm going to do is just work my way across here kind of randomly. I mean, there's no way I would need to create the leaves exactly, you know, obviously where they are. It's something you got to learn what's important in terms of detail and what needs to be a little bit more impressionistic but believable. You know, at the end I'm going to spend a lot more time with the details of the house. Often with both house portraits and pet portraits, people portraits, I spend a lot of time doing the background before the main subject. And again, a lot of people would say, you know, if they don't, you know, do art in the same way, logically you would think, well, if it's a portrait of the house, why don't you do the house first and then put the background in? But you know, first of all, it's setting, context, and the background elements and the foreground can set the stage for the color tone, and the sense of value, the light and dark. Like everything is like kind of relative to something else. So I wouldn't want to like totally ignore the house. Like I would want to, you know, start getting in a sense of that. Like I really want to try to preserve, maybe even emphasize more than it is in the photo, this sense of light. Because I feel like when it's done, hopefully the house will kind of glow. In a sense of light and shadow. Sorry, I'm trying to paint and talk at the same time and articulate what I'm going to try to go back here with some more of the green. Let me wet that and try to dip in. See, that's all getting all muddied up now with the white gouache, but I might want to some green in there. And as this dries, so I'm kind of going down the line, I'm letting it dry a little bit, and then I'm, you know, with watercolor you got to work fast. Once you decide what you're doing, at some point I'll probably come back in with some purple and see how that mingles, to create some depth in the leaves. And this cadmium yellow will have its part in this too. Anyway, yeah, you have to kind of work on something as a whole, and I can't overstate how important to me the background is in any painting. It just needs to all work together somehow, and you know, it is kind of a dance back and forth, you know, like how much of the foreground, how much of the background, how much of the main subject do you approach at one time. Okay, I'm kind of feeling like this is drying a little bit more than I want. I might even see this sap green kind of got diluted, polluted, or whatever with the white gouache, but I'm kind of starting there. I'm going to do this fast while it's wet. Kind of starting there because I really do want to provide some way to bring back that, you know, the white somehow, like to so hold on, I'm going to pause here a minute. Okay, I just put out a little bit of pigment called hooker green. Again, I don't know how this, well, that must be named after someone. I don't know. I just muse in my mind how like paints get their names, some of them. Wait a minute. Did I do? Yeah, I think I did the hooker green. This is the hooker green. And that's the sap green. They're very close. I've always been partial to sap green, maybe because of the name. But, you know, in recent times, I've explored other colors. Yeah, this is the hooker green. It's definitely, it's more of a, I don't know, like a vibrant kind of color. Sap green, well, I'll try to show the difference somewhere here. Let me just put, there's the hooker green. This is sap green here on the plate. Oops. So you can see that the sap green's a little more yellow, olivey, a little more subdued. Definitely that'll work nice for some of these parts here. Okay, so before this dries, I want to take the hooker green because it's a little bit more vibrant and just kind of dab it in to some of these areas. Oh dear, dear, dear. Gotta work fast. Okay, so where these rhododendrons are coming down into the bush, there's some dark areas that could really use a little emphasis. Like, what if I did that? So that's very wet. I'm just gonna let it be for a little bit. It can be hard to tell how this is going to ultimately dry. Watercolor always dries lighter. And so as you learn to handle watercolor, you kind of get a sense of just how much darker to go, knowing that by the time it dries, it will lighten up. And of course, you know, you never want to, oh my goodness, a stink bug. Nasty little creature. I'll get you later. You know, you never want to paint just pure pigment. You know, you have to wet, and, you know, watercolor is about transparency. Okay, so I'm wondering now what's going to happen. Should I put the yellow in first or the purple? What happens if I get a little purple? That's going to give some brightness to a few things there. Now, you got to remember, purple and yellow are complements, as are red and green. So with watercolor, you have to be careful, because if you dab in complements when they're wet and overdo it. Now this is kind of interesting. I'm leaving a little hint of that hot pink behind. Hopefully that'll work in some way when I come back over these greens when they dry and get some pinks back in. I'm just not sure how this is going to go. But, oh, wait, I was using the cadmium yellow here. Oh, dear. So, they say watercolor is very unforgiving, and it is. It's very risky. I don't know. I like that. That's pretty. There's not really yellow in this, but this might really. I mean, the reason you get a painting is so it doesn't look like a photograph. I like that. I feel like that's going to dry really nice. I'm going to try to replicate that somewhere else. I could get in trouble just trying to do the same thing, but I don't know. Oh, it's so wet. I'm trying to get some yellows into there. Maybe what I should do is just give it a minute and move on down to this. This is already getting a little dry. I'm just gonna, I want the wet on wet. I'm just wetting it here and there with some clear water. Okay, so let's see. Get some of the hooker green. One thing I find about watercolor is that I have to be in the right mood or frame of mind to focus on this. I mean, it's just not something like if I'm stressed about something else, I may choose another activity that day and let something like this sit, because I don't know what I could compare it to. It's like I don't know, brain surgery or something. You know, you just don't want to make a mistake. A little hard to, you know, I mean, I've learned ways to get watercolor to forgive me. The unforgiving term of watercolor is very well known among artists, but you know, watercolor will only forgive you to a degree. Whereas, you know, acrylic gives lots, ooh, that's pretty. Lots of opportunity to change things quite a bit, which I'm kind of liking. I have another commission of a portrait of 5 children I need to start soon. I'm waiting to hear from the customer on something with the layout, but it's on canvas. It's actually going to be quite large, 30 by 40 inches, which I'm really excited about that. Okay. Oh, I wonder what I'm doing here. And I wonder aloud to myself, do I dare try the salt again? Like, what might that accomplish? Would it just mute everything out, soak it up? I don't know. Not sure how risky I feel tonight. Oh dear. So that's going to need to dry. There is one more, I think there's a, kind of looks like there might be a, oh yeah, that's right. This is before they were in bloom. Yes, I think there's a rhododendron back there. I had allowed for it. Maybe I'll just kind of hit that one too. Get some of the sap green and the white together, and then drop some of the hooker green into it. Kind of let it do its thing. Missed out a cadmium yellow. Okay. Don't know what would happen if I use salt, but I don't think I'm going to, at least not yet. And I feel like that's just a little too wet. You see how wet that is? To work with throwing a little bit of purple in there. So I'm going to pause this soon. I do want to say, I have, at my age, I've got a developing cataract in one of my eyes. It's not terrible, but it was noticed in 2020, and I find sometimes I have more problems with glare than normal. And I tell you, like watercolor, it glistens, and this glare that's produced, you know, I have to sometimes, as I paint with watercolor now, is turn at different angles so I can kind of see, because if I'm at certain angles, it's a little bit of a blinding quality to it. Anyway, the woes of getting older as an artist. So I'm going to let this dry, and then probably in about, I'll give it 3 or 4 minutes, I'm going to come back and add in some purple here. That would really help this. And actually, maybe there's something else I can work on while I'm waiting here. So here's the deal. I started with a purple shadow on this, and then I went over it with burnt sienna, which is a color typical for brickwork. If I want to emphasize this, right now there's a pretty light area there. I want to be really careful to preserve that. What I could do is this, as this is drying, is work with some more purple. So that the darker the shadow of purple, the lighter that brickwork will appear, the lighter part. So what I'm going to do here is go in and get, sorry for the plates on the floor. I'm being real here, and my bathroom sink is the paint sink, you know, because I do watercolors inside rather than out in my shop, where I do more canvas painting and framing. But yeah, I got a lot of stuff going on here on a Friday night. But sorry, soup bowls, everything. So I do want to get clear, fresh water. That's important when you're working with watercolor, not to let your water get too muddy. So what I could do here, demonstrate, is, so I'm stirring this up, so you can kind of get a feel for it on the plate. Now, okay, there was some whitewash on this plate. I can tell it's muddying that just a little bit. Maybe I'll even, I'm being lazy here, could try to clean the plate off. I'm just doing it with the paper towel. I just want to get that whitewash out of there, because that is taking away from the purity of this. There's no need to be a neat freak when you're painting. My table is, it's a messy mess. Okay, it works for me. Okay, so that's a little bit more pure here. You can see how that, so if I add more water to it, thinner, you know, we get a thinner glaze. Okay, so how dark do I want to go with this? I'd say, see, I'm feeling it. Like this, I can, let me tilt this so that nothing else runs down into it. I'm really being lazy because I'm filming with one hand here, but okay. So I'm going to take a look at this picture again. I caught a little shadow there that's going over the shutter, and I kind of like that right now. I want to keep that. Later, the shutter color will go over top of it. Okay, do you see? I'm going in here. I think this is a good level of darkness of the glaze. Okay, so, oh dear, the gutter. I'm taking a look at this, trying to. Okay, I think I need to go right up to that part there. I'm looking at the picture. Now, one thing with watercolor, see how this dry edge, if you don't work quick, you can't let the edges dry. This is wet on dry technique, but my goal is for a smooth application on this area, so I have to be careful. I work quickly, and I keep wetting the edges to extend a little bit, because if they dry before you're done, if you paint too slowly, you'll get a hard edge. Now here in the bushes, I did wet on wet, which I pre-wet the paper either with paint or clear water. See, I'm going right down over this brick molding, because the brick will be put in last. Again, like, see, that's going to start to dry, so I need to just wet it, keep it moving. You know, some people would think, oh, you know, you're painting a portrait. Why didn't you start with the eyes, get the eyelashes on, all that? Or why didn't you start by painting the brick? It's not the way it works. The brick is like the cherry on the icing on the cake. And the last details go last. Part of me wonders, should I have, well, I'm just talking loud here. Never mind. I won't even say what I was thinking. It's too complicated. Oh, why not? I'll just say it. Okay, so there's other times I've done, I'm trying to get a hair off of that. There's other times I've done brick houses where I might have, you know, started with a cream, kind of like maybe something like a yellow ochre to start to, and then put the bricks over that and leave, you know, that what am I trying to say? The yellow ochre would have provided the line work in the bricks, because the brick would go on top of it and then you could still go over it with a shadow. Sometimes I tend now to just go ahead and omit kind of that much detail of brickwork. I mean, it's a style thing. I mean, I could just keep going and going like it, you know, maybe years ago. What was it better? Was it, I don't know, or was it just too detailed? I think that, you know, when you stand back from the painting, you know, the eye blends a lot of things together, and it doesn't have to be too literal. So I do feel better about just starting with a glaze of burnt sienna. I guess I could allow that to yet be, and it will to some degree, especially if I leave that really light, it's going to provide the line work that's behind the brick. I hope I'm not losing some people. I imagine only the really, really watercolor curious have watched to this point. Okay. It's a little tricky to try to look at the picture, paint, and film. Okay, so a lot of times I need to stand back. Do you see how that's building up there? This bothers me a little bit here, that little, I'm going to wet, try to straighten that line a little bit. See how I'm just kind of washing it off. You can do that a little bit. You can almost also, like, you know, smooth out some of the colors too if I need. There's tiny little spots of pink on there. Okay, so then there's this area in here and on the roof. Now that roof is got a really darker shadow, but I'm going to go in. It's a little darker than I was using, so I'm going to wet it more. So I want to get this side about the same intensity of value as the front of the house. And purple colors within gray and black really excite me, for lack of a better descriptor. It just, you know, you just don't want to paint with black and gray or watered down, you know, you just don't. Like the color, that's a color killer, you know. I avoid black like the plague in my paintings. I would reserve black just for a few things that might truly be black, a mailbox or, you know, wrought iron or something like that. Or, I mean, I do use some black in a black or a gray roof, but not unless I first have color to support my use of black, like underneath of it. You know, throwing a little, you know, on the shingles, a few, like dabbing between some black and some purple and all, it can work. But You just got to be really careful. This is bothering me, this little thing here. I'm going to take a little bit of purple and go in here and it's bleeding a little bit. Yeah. I'll have to work with that later with a smaller brush to define that. Possibly even taking a fine marker at the end. I find that sometimes just putting a few little very fine marker details here and there, and that marker is black, help things to pop, but it kind of depends on how it works itself out. Okay, so this is still wet. I'm still waiting. So this is kind of how I do with the watercolor. You know, I might find another area to work on. Another artist that I know, Tillman Hemsley, told me one time, he's a fantastic artist. He's married to my cousin Laura. He said that, you know, when you're working on a painting and you work on an area, it will tell you, the painting will tell you where to go next. And I find that is really true. Sometimes you get overwhelmed. You just don't know what to do next on a painting, and you just start somewhere. You just, you know, it's like in life. You just know the kind of the next step you need to take. And all of a sudden, you know, you find yourself knowing where to go next in the painting. You know, it kind of talks to you, I suppose. Okay, so that's helping things. Very concerned about that. That's really wet there, but this is drying quicker. I'm going to take this smaller brush and go into the purple, and I am going to get a little bit more pigment on there. I'll pick this bush to start. Okay, do you see how that's like very dark in there, in that area? Right there. Okay, that's where I am in the painting. So I'm going to start establishing some really dark areas and just kind of give the, using the film here. Yeah, again, I'm just going to wind around through here, and of course, you know, maybe some of those dark areas will be darker down lower in between the bush. I'm even looking at the shape there under that other blooming bush. I'm going to go ahead and just get that shape in. Okay, so if I stand back, now up here, I'm just going to dab here and there, and see, this is kind of starting to dry. So that this will dry with a little bit of a hard edge, and I think what I'm going to do is to leave this after I get these purples in, and just let it dry really well for tonight, and not go back into it with more greens, yellows, or pinks until I know what this does. And watercolor can be dry to the touch, you know, sometimes within 5 minutes, but there's something that happens when you let it sit overnight. Especially, I work on very, very heavy paper. It's Arches 300-pound paper. And I do that because it takes a lot of different watercolor layers and techniques. If you use a thin paper, the paper becomes too saturated to just keep going and going with endless layers, revisions, all that. So I always use the really best, heaviest paper. So I feel like it sinks into the paper in some way. It dries. Like, I feel like sometimes it just dries on the surface, and you find that the next morning when you look at it, there's yet more color shifts, or in terms of like how dark things dry to be. So, okay, I feel like going into this right now. So I'm dabbing, oh, you can't see what I was doing. I'm dabbing that, and what you can do is just wet and, you know, maybe pull it a little bit out, and that'll let it dry with some irregular look to it. See, I'm really going heavy now because I'm kind of being a little decisive about this. But it, you know, some places remain light. Some places I'm establishing the range. I'm going really dark. And if I can keep my compulsions under control to keep working and touching and going over stuff, that might be good, because sometimes you just got to know when to stop and leave something, you know, and decide, okay, that's dark enough, that's done enough to move on. See, what I don't want to happen is for it to get too muddy if the purple gets mixed too quickly in with the yellow. This is a little more dry. I'm going to see what happens. As long as it doesn't disperse too much. Okay, now I got to be careful here because, oh, and I missed, there's actually greenery behind this area, which I've left white here. And there's the tree branches, so I'm going to keep that in consideration here. I'm trying to peek up at these branches while I'm just going to dabble there. Hopefully I have the shape close enough to picture. Now here's where I would, no, sorry, I'm looking at the picture. Here's where I would maybe go ahead and start getting these branches in with the negative space. And then that's a, looking back, that's a porch railing and some pattern. I'm not going to get in tremendous detail there. But, okay, so purple works well on tree branches too. Oh, let's see. I feel like I want to go ahead and it's hard to know for sure where they are. Just gonna make it believable. See what's happening there? So it's almost like developing a picture. You just, it comes slowly into focus. I'm just going to establish a few branches like peeking out there. And I'm going to consider the trunk here. I'm going to pull that on down. And it looks to me like there's a darker under edge. And this is actually coming up. I might need to make some adjustments on this later. But, oh, whoops. Let's see. Get the bottom of it. Okay, do I want to do a darker shadow in before I've gotten the grass? I think I might want to kind of just go into that a little bit. Okay, so we got that. Okay, so back to this purple. I got digressed because of that space that was behind there that was white. I still have some white in there, and I'm just going to go ahead and darken that. So I'm actually starting to get a little bit into the shrubs that are in front of it, but I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Okay, I'm about to call this quits, but I do want to get here. The woes of eye issues. I also technically need trifocals, but I just can't wear them. So I wear glasses to drive and glasses sometimes for close-up reading. I'm not going to be moving my head around too much, but this watercolor work, sometimes it's hard to find a sweet spot of soft focus or standing back so it's a little bit more clear. Or Okay, so see, this painting is telling me where to go. I'm going to tell you where it's telling me in a minute. So it's still really, really wet in there. What it's telling me is now that this darkness feeds into the darkness on the other shrubs, and I feel like it would just be appropriate to take a little bit bigger brush and go right ahead and, you know, kind of start forming that shape. And I'm going to spread this with some water. I'm going a little dark here. And in the end, I will glaze over with green to unify that. But, okay, so I've just got pure water on there, and I want to soften that edge, let it pull out. And trying to refer back to these as a paint, look at the photo. Oh, sorry. I was on the wrong part. Try to hold my camera still here. Okay, I'm going to hit this while it's wet with just a little bit more dark, because that's going to dry. Ooh, that's nice, the way that's spreading. That gives a little bit of a texture feel. The one thing you remember with watercolor is you tell it where to go. It travels on water. As long as you keep that in mind, it will not go anywhere that you don't allow it to go by giving it water. Okay, so I'm going to take some just clear water. I'm going to drop it in. And sometimes I just saturate things with clear water, because that, like letting it be really wet as it shrinks down and dries, can produce really nice effects. But the thing is, we won't know for sure till it's done just what kind of effect it's going to give. But I've done this enough times that I generally am confident in what I'm doing here. I try to speed this up a little bit, because the video is getting long. My eyes are getting tired. I'm looking at shapes here. I may need to get into these differently. Okay, take some clear water, just drop in. Okay, so you get the idea that I'm going to finish off this on this side, but I'm going to stop the film right now. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Okay, I'm back for just a few minutes longer. I worked my way across, and this dropping of water in there is a little bit more than I had hoped. Maybe I was expecting something different. It's not an exact science. So what I sometimes do is take a little paper towel, and you can, suck up a little. I'm trying to do this while I'm filming. It's hard. And I just take a little water, paper towel, and absorb some of it up. It's not going that well, but I do see. Why it's not coming out. Okay, I do see that something is. See, watercolor will go where you let it, and the water ran out somehow there, and it's smeared down. So the way to get rid of things like this, and this is where I mentioned earlier staining and non-staining colors. So if you just take clear water and wet the part you don't want there, take a paper towel, dab it, wet it a little bit more. Sometimes, depending on what it is, you can even scrub a little bit. And get it up, sort of. But yeah, that stained a little bit, but that's okay. That's not going to matter. But what I want to do here, just before I really call it quits on this, I'm going to get a little bit of green. See what happens if I kind of dab it around here into these darker areas, and maybe even kind of let it just kind of be irregular. You know what? I feel like I need the cadmium yellow at the same time. Hold on. Okay, I put a little cadmium yellow on this plate. And so I just feel like while it's wet, I may as well kind of capitalize on that. Dropping a little bit of green into the purple, which will give it a tint, but I'm going to take some of this yellow and see what happens if I start around like this and then come down and just let it touch. See how it's running? See, again, it's travels on water. It will only go where you allow it, and I'm allowing it to intermingle there a little bit. Now this gets to be a curiosity as how that's going to actually dry, and right now I'm allowing just bold, oh, that's smeared, just some bold yellow. Oh, it's really wet. And my paper's a little buckled, so it's running downward. I'm going to go ahead and allow this bolder yellow, because if it dries too yellow, I can tone it down. Oh, that's really smearing. But you know what? I feel like it needs to do that. I just feel like we need to find out what's going to happen with this. That's getting a little bit muddy. I'm going to hold off there. That's really swirling around. Do you see how that's going? I'm going to let that dry more. I'm going to get over to this other side here. See, now sometimes I think it's going to dry a little bit more texturized, and then it doesn't. So I've gotten some green in there. I'm going to come back with the yellow. Kind of work its shape in that bush just a little bit. Just dabbing it in, letting it do its thing. Okay. One technique is to maybe not do the one next to it just yet, to maybe pick a different bush. Something on paper, something, gob of yellow paint. Okay. There's a hair in that. Probably a cat hair. I'm trying to get it out. Okay. That is really, really messy in there. I'm just going to let it dry. See how glistening it is from this angle? It's glaring, but let me get it like that. Yeah, I think that's coming along. I think that's enough progress for tonight. And yeah, I'm liking that light on the house. I mean, it's brighter than the actual photo, but that's good. Oh, I just can't stop. I just can't stop. You know what? This happens sometimes. I am tempted. I am really tempted to just take it a little further. Where's a bigger brush? Where's my brush? Where's my brush that I'm so in love with? My big brush. There it is. That one. I knew I'd find it. Okay. I am feeling like, oh boy, do I want to do this or not? Do I want to go in there with some yellows? I got like some fresh cadmium yellow there. And I think I'm going to do it for the end of the night. I think I'm going to take my really big brush and just wet it, clear water. You know what I'm going to do also? I don't like that paper's buckling. I'm going to stick it under there. Maybe, I don't know, wait, that's not heavy enough. my water jar. My water jar would weight it down. I just want it a little bit better. Okay. So I'm just going to wet it here. Stick it up. Wet it. And then I'm going to take this more favorite brush. It's just about the right size for what I want to do. And I'm just going to generally, here's where I might be tempted to throw in some salt before I go to bed and see what happens, because I've not yet tainted this lawn with white gouache. Hold on. Oh, that's running down. I'm just going to let it. Hold on, I need more cadmium yellow. Okay, it's kind of a two-handed thing to put a little bit more yellow out. Okay, could dip into that. Keep it wet. This is kind of an accident. It just looks interesting. It's not really where the shadow is, but I kind of like it dribbling down. I might just leave it. I can get it out later if I don't like it at the end. Just trying to generally see the lighter areas on this lawn. I don't know, it kind of has this, I don't know, a sense of the grass being cut in a certain way or something, or the light. See, I'm getting a little dramatic here with the amount of paint. Like, you got to know sometimes just how much paint to allow. Again, it's not an exact science. Little bit of trial and error, a little bit of experience. Wow, wet on wet. See, I'm letting it. I guess I'm feeling a little risky tonight. But I'm not so sure I want it to bleed too much. But that might be interesting. That might be really interesting. Oh, should I go all the way down to the sidewalk? I think I should, maybe. I'm thinking of throwing some salt into this too and just seeing what happens. I actually found that, using regular table salt seems to crystallize sometimes better than the kosher salt. But I don't know. Wonder if I should try both. Just see what happens. I mean, I think it'll be okay. One thing is, sometimes I do get good salt effects in the grass, just a sense of creative texture. But then sometimes I have to be careful not to lose it as I continue to go in with other colors. Oh, this is pretty. You know what would really be pretty? A little bit of the opera pink going into it, and I'm almost out. I'm going to have to get two hands to squeeze this. Hold on. It's kind of dried up in the tube. I might be able to get a little bit out. Sometimes I can get suddenly excited in a watercolor and go beyond what I planned. And so I did squeeze out a little bit of the opera pink. It's a little dry, but because it's like the last in the tube. But now, why in the world would I put pink in a lawn? Well, because it's beautiful. And it's dramatic, and pink is a complement of green. So in some weird way, it may make the greens look greener before it's all said and done. But, it's just, again, a trick. How much do I want to let in there? I do like throwing pink into grass. That is really running down. That is just too wet for my liking. Although salt might do a little trick. That's too wet for salt. I'm going to suck some of that back up. Okay. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave that really wet. Okay. Okay, and here's where, see, the painting's telling me where to go. Color, harmony, and unity. I don't know why, I just kind of feel like doing this. I just feel like putting a little bit of pink into the sidewalk. I don't want to lose all my texture I had there. Might have overdone that. I can go back a little if I need. That's pretty. That's just gonna, I might put just a little bit in here, not too much. Add some water. Okay, what else do I want to do to make this sing? Make colors sing, right? Okay, you know what I want to do? I want to get some of that in here. Yes. Yes. Bet you didn't expect this. I didn't plan on this either, but it just feels right. Feels right. I feel like putting some on the roof. Yep. Get a little pink in there. Oh, I need more pink. And Hobby Lobby does not carry this. I need to probably order some on Amazon or somewhere tonight. Just a tube. Okay, can I get any more pink? I know I've got some over there. I had some somewhere. I'm going to get more out of the tube. Okay, I'm back. A little bit more. I just feel like this needs to sing a little bit. At least for now. Just get a little bit of glaze of color in there. Just don't want this house to be boring, do we? Like a photograph. Well, photos aren't always boring, but I'm kind of talking to myself now. This is really starting to sing. Okay. I want to go in here. Get a little glaze. This color is going to help. Let's see, what do I want to do here? I want a smaller brush. I'm going to work fast because I still might want to put some salt in this. I'm going to go over this brick and that. Okay. And you know what I'm going to do? Besides talk to myself here on a Friday night about painting. Okay. I'm going to take more of this. Get a lot of it. Wonder if I can bring back some of that sense of these blooming rhododendrons. Well, I seem to be doing it here somehow. I'm just gonna, that's the phrase my mom always used to use, give it a lick and a promise. Must be like an older frame. Frame. I'm concentrating. I'm trying to talk while I'm painting here, and it really should be more wordless. An older phrase. Give something a lick and a promise. Just get a little bit of that pink in there while I can. I'll come back to it tomorrow. Or another day. Okay, this, I'm liking this. But this, oh, where's the bigger brush? My water's a little dirty, but I think I can probably get away with still putting yellow on it without messing it up too much. I just want more bright yellow. I want it really bright. This needs to be a happy house, a home. Oh boy. Okay, that's probably pretty good. Give it a little bit there, and I want to catch a little yellow. I don't want it to bleed into this pink on the chimney, but I do want to get a little yellow into the side there for some light. Okay, now, well, I'm just going to see what happens. I'm just going to sprinkle some salt in it. How much is enough? I don't know. I mean, you can see at this angle the wetness and the salt laying in it. If I rub it on the edge of the paper, you can see the crystals moving around. I don't know. I just don't quite have the hang of, do I want the salt to be thicker and absorb? See, I can start to kind of see it crystallize. You know, I can start to see it, but sometimes it just ends up different than I expect. I can always go at it again. I might get some effects here that I'll leave that will be just right. I'll just put in the tree too. Okay, well, there we go. I really do think I'm going to call it quits now. Good night.